Hello and welcome to Brits on Flicks, your monthly movie podcast where we discuss, dissect and deliberate over a movie of our choosing. This time it is a 1988 classic, Heathers. So this is something that I know we're both looking forward to getting into, but before we do, let's do a little bit of housekeeping early on. You know, I was looking at the iTunes stat. We've had a few reviews. We've got 5 stars across the board so far. Some very nice comments, but you know, they're a little bit older. We've not had any recent comments, so we really appreciate the fact that you're listening to the show, and we'd appreciate it even more if you would take a couple of seconds just to rate us, give us a little review. If we get any other new ones, we'll possibly lead them out on the show.
Yep.
There we go, quick and easy. Thanks in advance. So, Brian, your history with Heathers.
Oh man, my history with Heathers is pretty much that I watched it to death when I was in my late teenage years during high school. So yeah, I was a big fan of Batman Returns. At one point, in fact, Batman Returns was my favourite film of all time. This obviously being when I was like 12, 13 years old. I think it may have even lasted up until about the age of 15. Batman Returns was still my favourite film of all time. And one of the big things about that was Daniel Waters, who wrote the screenplay for it. I just thought the screenplay that he did for Batman Returns was so off-kilter, so dark, twisted for a summer blockbuster that is kind of, you know, caught up in deals with McDonald's toys and things. So I thought, Daniel Waters, let's check out what else he's done. And the thing on his CV that most people seemed to be talking about was Heathers. So I went, I got it on DVD, I watched it, and man, just loved it. It just really spoke to me. And I think I've spoken before on the podcast about my school days and them not particularly being my favourite kind of period of my life. I didn't like school, and I buried myself in movies. That was kind of my escape. I would come home after school. Thankfully, I had my own video, VCR and TV, and I had about 20, 30 films that would be on constant rotation, and this was one of them. So yeah, I didn't buy it on DVD actually. I take that back, it was video. I bought it on video. Yeah, it spoke to me a lot because, like I say, I hated school. So I in a way, I felt, this is going to sound weird, I felt like Veronica because she, you know, I was never part of the clique. I was never part of the cool kids or anything like that. But I had her same disdain for the people around her, you know, those cliquey groups, and just I had this kind of affinity towards people who were somewhat outcasts, such as myself, and often would come to the defence of some of them, which got me in trouble. So yeah, it just spoke to me, and in many ways I think I kind of wanted to be JD. I identified with his character, not the psychopathic tendencies, but the desire, I guess, the desire to clean slate, clean house, and do something about it. So yeah, so on all those levels it spoke to me, and I just watched it again and again and again.
Yep, much the same. This was a constant repeat for me when I was younger as well. I just thought the movie was a hell of a lot of fun. It had this really weird and unusual tone that I don't really think I had seen in many movies at that time. And it was something that spoke to me as well, much like yourself. I felt was a little bit of an outsider at school. It was never in any particular group. You know, we kind of bounced between them all, so I kind of had an affinity with most of the people in this movie. You know, that kind of awkwardness within yourself that some of the characters have. And then when it turns to the violence and the ridiculousness, it still manages to skate a very fine line that I kept me coming back, you know, whether it was a message within it or whether it was just fun entertainment. I found Heathers to be an enjoyable watch, and something that has happened a lot actually, where I've binged a movie. You know, I've watched it so many times that I almost forget about it. It ekes out the brain, and then this has possibly been about 15 years since I last saw it, so I was eager to revisit it, which we've done. So let's have a synopsis first, shall we?
Okay, so at Westerberg High School, an elite clique made up of 3 snobby girls, each called Heather, reigns supreme. Smart and popular, Veronica, played by Winona Ryder, is a reluctant member of the gang and disapproves of their cruel behaviour. When Veronica and her mysterious new boyfriend, JD, played by Slater, play a trick on the clique leader, Heather Chandler, and accidentally poison her, they frame it as a suicide. But it soon becomes clear to Veronica that JD is a sociopath, intent on vengefully killing the school's popular students. She races to stop JD in an explosive final confrontation, at the same time clashing with Heather Duke, the new self-appointed leader of the Heathers.
Well done. So, where do we start on this behemoth of a movie?
For me, I just think this came at towards the end, the arse end of the 80s. Like I think it was 88, I think. And by this point, we had been pretty much saturated with John Hughes style high school movies, and I think this was pretty much the antidote to those. And that's not me slagging off John Hughes movies, because I love them. We may even speak about some of them later on in this episode. But just it takes everything that you kind of see in those John Hughes movies and really puts the darkest possible spin on them.
Yeah, like you were saying, very different from the John Hughes stuff, but it seems to have, like I said, a very fine line in it where it actually does tackle a topic of teenage suicide, but does it in a ridiculous manner as well, which you could be forgiven for saying, just hearing about the plot, there is bad taste, but I feel it handles it exceptionally well, especially the aftermath and the reaction of all the students and parents and news people. I think it is hilarious, but more than anything, it feels very now. The way people instantly react to things, and it may not be the exact way that it's supposed to be across, but they interpretate it and put a voice on these things, which I thought was quite fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. It does have a lot to say, I think, about the way in which culture works, and how we misread each other. Like just like you say, on paper, very bad taste. But like seeing the way in which someone like the first Heather Chandler, who's when she's killed, she's an absolute bitch, and yet when suddenly the moment people think she took her own life, their whole perception of her changes, and it's like in the John Hughes movie, if this were the John Hughes movie, you wouldn't get a suicide, but if you did, then it would be for this reason. It would be that the jock a-hole was actually underneath a deep, caring person who was misunderstood, and that's why they took their own life. Whereas here, they're not. They genuinely are an arsehole. But it's just playing on that, the way in which the media might pick up something, run with it, turn it into something that it isn't, in order to create a movement. #MeToo. It's just things like that. It feels very relevant, I think, even today, with regards to how the media like to spin things and create a fervour to get people all carried away with stuff. It's very dark, it's very humorous, and yet it's also very serious and quite poignant at the same time. one of my favourite moments actually is right towards the end, which is when Veronica reaches out a hand, I guess, of friendship towards Martha.
Betty.
Yeah, Martha Dump Truck, as they
they
call her. Yeah. So Betty as well. Yeah, I do like that moment as well. The way she goes back to her old friend, but particularly, this woman who is clearly bullied. She's the biggest outcast in more ways than one of the school, and you can't help but feel for her throughout. And that awful moment at the beginning when Veronica forges that note because the Heathers tell her to, and she does what she's told basically to fit in, and she goes from being that girl to being someone who in the end will actually, she'll do what she feels is right, and she reaches out to Martha at the end.
I think she's probably one of the most fascinating characters within the movie, because very interestingly, she doesn't say anything until the final scene of the movie. She's not given a voice. She's not allowed to speak throughout the movie. She's kept quiet. She's constantly berated and run down and picked upon because of nothing more than pretty much her size. And even when you have the people who are, say, committing suicide or being murdered, they're being lauded after the fact for being fantastic human beings. She fails in her attempt, and that's just another nail in her coffin. That's another thing to berate the person about. And yet
she's the only one who is a genuine attempt at suicide. So the one person that is actually trying to reach out to the world, that is actually doing it for the right reasons. Like I don't know how else to phrase that, but and she's picked upon even further for it, and yet, like you say, the people who had genuine arseholes are suddenly seen as something different because they were successful or believed to be successful in their attempts. So
and at the heart of the movie, you get Veronica, who is someone that's in the in crowd, but doesn't really want to be there, but doesn't want to be in the outside of that circle either. And then you have JD, who's new in school, who is most definitely a loner, very comfortable in himself, very happy to speak his mind and his own actions, and isn't willing to be intimidated by anybody. There's a scene right at the start where she sees him in the canteen, and most people, when they make eye contact with a stranger, tend to look away for a moment, and you just get this character of JD who leans more into it, who takes interest in the fact. You find it, or you have an idea that instantly he knows the lay of the land. He's seen this type of environment before, and it's not going to wash over him gently. He's going to do what he's going to do later on. But what do you think about the pairing of Jack Nicholson Jr. and Winona Ryder?
I was wondering if anyone was going to bring that up. I know that a lot of people have talked about a young Christian Slater being very reminiscent of a young Jack Nicholson. I never actually saw it myself until somebody made that comparison, and I can see it's there, but he's not quite as full on as good old Jack. But and that moment you talked about when he's making the eye contact, I really love that moment, because without saying any words, the two of them have a full-blown conversation. You see his disapproval of what she's done. He saw her put the note in, and there's like a recognition there between the two, and he does this slight gesture with his hands, like,
why
are you doing that? But also at the same time, you can be better than that. You don't need to be that woman. So they basically just have this full-on conversation without saying any words. I do think it's a nice bit of acting, but it highlights the chemistry between these two actors. I think Winona Ryder and Christian Slater are absolutely brilliant on screen together, and I think it's the pairing of those two, for the most part, that really makes this film succeed. That, along with the script, I think the script is absolute dynamite, especially, as I say, coming off the back of all those John Hughes movies of the 80s. But definitely, I think you put two different actors in those roles. It's arguable whether you would have the same success, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you get the idea that Veronica's an incredibly smart person. You know, it's drip-fed to you throughout it. She's very intelligent. JD is obviously smart and psychotic at the same time, but you feel that she goes along with it. You know, you have a feeling that she knows in the back of her head that things aren't going to play out the way you expect. The bullets situation, for one. He makes up this story about the bullets, and she probably knows it's a load of crap, but she just goes along with it because she likes this guy. She buys into his ideals a little bit, you know.
Well, maybe too much, in fact. And I think there's a real honest moment from JD, and maybe a dishonest moment from Veronica when she says, you know, ich Luger bullets, how could I be so stupid? And he replies, well, actually, you knew. If you're being honest with yourself, you knew. You know, and I think part of her did know, which kind of, it throws a huge switch on the moral kind of compass of this character. That there's only so much I can kind of be on board with her, but I think the reason I am on board with her as much as I am is, again, because of Winona Ryder's performance. She's got a very good kind of girl next door vibe about her, and
there's fantastic scenes. The adults in this movie are all idiots, imbeciles completely. Look at the parents, for instance. You get Veronica's parents, who are like constantly with the pate. They sit down, they have a similar conversation. They're not having an in-depth conversation with their daughter. You know, it's surface level.
It's all parents
really interested. It's not really interested. You get the conversation between JD and his father, where they kind of do a role reversal type of thing, where they know a little bit too much. They are nigging at each other. You know, they're oversharing with the things that they've had. You get the happy teacher who is just happy to be right for once. That's it. She has a cause. That's everything she needs. Even the cops that discovered the bodies in the woods, you know, just like, I think we know everything we need to go. Sparkling water.
Yeah, that moment when he pulls that bottle of water, they set that up so beautifully, and then when he pulls it out, I was just in stitches.
It's funny. It's just the idiots of the adults are just, you know, everywhere to be seen. And then you have these characters who are smarter than smart, who know the lay of the land better than their brainwashed parents almost.
I really love the score as well, actually, in this, and it's during that scene when the cop pulls the water out. It's actually when JD's chasing the jock guy down. The music to that, it might actually be that moment, or it might be the moment towards the end when just before JD blows himself up, where just the music is actually, I couldn't think what it reminded me of, and I was like, I kept on humming it in my head, and I suddenly realised that actually one of my favourite bands, Muse, they did a song called Plug-in Baby, and the riff to that bit it's pulled from Heathers. It's like that bit of music. It's just so. But I love the music, and after watching it this time, I did actually download the score, as I'm often prone to do, and I've been listening to it a fair bit over the past few days. It's a really great 80s film score.
Yeah, and something that really surprised me going back to this movie was the fact that Veronica and JD split up much earlier on than I remembered. And it becomes an almost battle of will between these characters, because Veronica knows that she's kick-started something. She, as much as she doesn't want to admit it, she has started a movement with JD, which she is going to finish, and it becomes, you know, like a proper battle between these two people, playing constant chess moves, trying to outsmart each other. Yeah,
because even though this is a darker take on a John Hughes movie, as I keep saying, it still has that whole coming of age kind of vibe to it and thread that a John Hughes movie would have, because this is really all about this girl finding her identity amidst a sea of opposing forces, I guess. Like it's basically you go in high school, that's all it is. It's clique after clique after clique, groups, segregation, popularity versus outcasts and whatnot. And how do you find out who you are amongst all of that? How do you gain independence, an independent thought amongst all that? And that's really what this film is about. It's about this woman who is torn this way and that, because deep down in her heart she is a geek. She wants to hang around with the geek crowd, but she's attracted to the popularity for the same reasons anyone would be. And it really is a film about her accepting who she is and not being apologetic for it, and choosing who she wants to spend time with because she wants to, not because it furthers her status. So yeah, in that regard, it's a coming of age movie. It's just it happens to be one in which this girl has actually committed murder, which for me is the it's the one sour spot in the film for me, which is that however much you try and gloss over it, she did shoot that guy. The the whole poisoning thing, I can kind of let that one slide because that was JD and his manipulation. But yeah, when that guy, she'd figured it out by that point, the whole Luger bullets thing. But she was still in that moment, even then, was bowing to peer pressure. And I think that was her final moment of peer pressure, actually. That's, you can't really get any more extreme when it comes to peer pressure, shooting someone, killing someone in order to belong, I guess. But after that moment, she says, screw it. And she recognises what she's become as well. We have these scenes with the diary entries where, she has this inner monologue, and she does talk about the monster she knows she's become.
I mean, if you look at the cast of characters, you look at the people on show here, are there any people that are likeable that come out of this winning at all?
I'd say Betty and Martha. They're the people to me who.
Is she? Because Betty's still longing for that friendship that seems to have moved on. She's still harbouring onto something that seems to have slipped away.
Well, yeah,
even when they have the crochet match, it's not connecting to old times.
No, I don't agree with that. I think that Betty still sees something in Veronica that ultimately, when we get to the end of the film, is proven to still be there. So it's not like it's a false hope. It's not like it's a pointless dream kind of thing. So I think she's just an innately good person who does want her friend back. At one point or another, these two have been the best of friends. She's got the photos to prove it. And yeah, I think of course she wants to reconnect, and of course she wants this person who she knew and loved to come back to the light side. And like I say, ultimately she does.
You get that great juxtaposition between Veronica and Betty and Heather and Martha, who were childhood friends, who spent a lot of time together, and who Heather takes great pleasure in the fact that she failed a suicide attempt. Yeah. That person's lost. She's gone forever. The goodness in her. She's just a nasty piece of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, I think as well, a lot of the clothing designs, a lot of the production in this are absolutely hilarious. The bright, silly colours and
the shoulder pads. Man, there was one moment in this film when I was looking at was it Veronica, or it may have been one of the Heathers? I'm pretty sure it was Veronica, and her shoulders just look so broad because of the pads. It was just, man, couldn't believe that this fashion at any point was socially acceptable.
Yeah, it's just a complete bonkers. I mean, I really loved Heathers, going back to it again. I can't, even if I'm picking in any faults, I'm nitpicking, really. You know, I don't think there's anything I could put it down on. I thought the script was fantastic, really layered. I think the direction, which is a debut film for Michael Lehmann, was a stunning debut that I think he struggled to better. To be fair, he just kind of knocked it out of the park. All the actors are pitch perfect. The tone, which would have been easy to lose, was just nailed 100%. I think it's a movie that still holds up today, with as much reverence and power as it did back then. Well, it's still having as much of a message as an entertaining movie, which is a really hard balance to find as well. I kind of went into a wrap up there, Brian, which I think I'll just finish off. Like, for me, Heathers is a stone cold classic. Absolutely, 5 out of 5. I know there's a stage show, which I think would be interesting, and I know that last year they did a TV series, which I'm curious about. Yep.
Wow. Okay. I did not know that.
Time, yeah, I think it's 10 episodes. If we had more time, I would have checked it out. I've heard the pilot's not great, but the series picks up. So,
okay,
interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I like I said, I love this film. It's one of my favourite movies of the 80s. Thankfully, it's one of those films that I had so much nostalgia for, and yet revisiting it after all this time, it still holds up. You know, there are films that haven't. You know, the films from my past that I watched all the time, Monster Squad, for example.
Awesome.
Just not hold up. Just do not hold up. But I love it. I like I say, the murder that Veronica commits is still a bit of a sour spot for me in allowing this character to have full redemption. I think in order to be truly redeemed, she needs to fess up to that murder, to the authorities, I guess. But that being said, we also have a whole thing in here, a look, shall we say, at the religious establishment. There's one point when JD says to Veronica, "Our love is God," which I think is a bit of a commentary on, shall we say, the godless youth of today, if you want to phrase it that way, which is that actually teenagers kind of they place too much emphasis on the love between one another, or what they perceive to be love between one another, whether that's through group associations or somebody they have an absolute obsession with, and that does become their god, and it steers them down wrong, terrible avenues. That's kind of what I see when I see this, and there are a few what could be perceived as jabs at religion, organised religion, whatever. There's a rather humorous sequence at the funeral when people keep kneeling down to look at the body and are supposed to be praying and paying their respects, but you hear the prayers inside their heads, and they're quite humorous. Particularly that jock guy who's like, but again, that speaks volumes of the generation to which the film is actually commenting on. That it is, for want of a better term, a godless generation. And well, look where it gets them in the film. I will say no more on that. But absolutely love the film. Performances, the music, the dark humour. Definitely one of my favourites of the 80s, and I will give it a 4.5 out of 5.
Okay. Just last word on Heathers before we move on, and I think a word that really encapsulates the full movie it boils it down to a T, says everything I need to say about it, and that word is Eskimo.